And thanks for joining us, Vanessa. Let's get right into it. Can you talk to me a little bit about M Schools and its resources for students and their families? I'm also interested in the motivating factors for you starting this program.
Yeah, we have the honor to partner with our undocumented students and families in creating safe and welcoming schools for our immigrant community. For me, I grew up undocumented in New York. I was a former DACA-mented teacher, so I had DACA and actually was able to teach, and I taught in Los Angeles
Mm.
and New York City. And I witnessed firsthand how our undocumented and mixed status students and families experience unique challenges in the K-12 system that are intersected with issues around both immigration and also education and educational equity. And so that really was the reason why myself and my other two co-founders, who are also immigrant women and formerly undocumented, decided to think about what the K-12 system could be like if it was welcoming and inclusive of our immigrant community. Since then, since our launch, we've been able to impact over 2,000 educators in ensuring that they have the right tools and resources
Wow.
on how to support our undocumented community. And also, we've been able to directly impact over 1,000 students and families directly, ensuring they have access to knowledge on their rights, higher education, and beyond.
One of the things that's making all of this really interesting right now, obviously, is the pandemic. Schools are opening back up after being closed, online classes, who has access to the internet, who doesn't. How is M Schools sort of shifting what it usually did to continue to assist these families in getting the educational experience they deserve?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, for COVID, our response was directly informed by our community. Before we took any
Mm.
action, we sought out to connect with parents, with families, with students directly before taking a course on what we should do. Our response was a combination of financial assistance because a lot of them were unable to receive any type of aid from both the federal government and then the state and the cities that they lived in. So we were honored
Wow.
to be able to fundraise over $150,000 over a period of
Mm.
3 months and directly disperse those resources to undocumented and mixed status families. In addition to that, we have shifted all of our programs now to the virtual setting. So we actually use a lot of Zoom, a lot of WhatsApp groups, which families were the ones who told us those were the ways in which they wanted to engage and be able to connect with resources and develop a community of trust. Recently, we received information around, for example, the New York City Department of Education changing and thinking about reopening schools at a later date. And so all of that information has been dispersed already to our families in the languages that they speak. And so now we're getting together to connect with families around resources and supports. At the same time that we're doing that, we're also partnering with our schools and our school districts, which we are located out in Texas, here in New York, and we're starting work in New Jersey this school year as well. And so we're going to continue our work, but now in a virtual context. And it's all being driven by what our families have told us and by their leadership and power.
You know, in June, the Supreme Court prevented the Trump administration from ending DACA, which, so many people saw as a huge win. But how does that directly impact the community that you serve?
Yeah, well, I want to name that DACA, right? As a former beneficiary of the program, I was a documented recipient. It
Mhm.
definitely paved the way for my trajectory right now. I am very much aware about how DACA can impact someone's trajectory. I think it's a snippet of what our immigrant community deserves and what our undocumented community in particular has been fighting for many, many, many years. And so right now, there's just so much information and so many updates that are happening in regards to DACA. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, which I think has been intentional
Mm.
from the part of this current government and this current administration to create a lot of confusion around what you are supposed to do and not supposed to do. So I've had parents who have young children who are thinking about, can I apply to DACA? And at the moment, if you're a new applicant, you can't apply to DACA. If you're a current beneficiary of the program, you could renew, but now it's been changed that it's from 2 years to 1 year. So all of
Mm,
this misinformation, right, and all of the things that are occurring
mm,
are currently being challenged by advocates, by leaders, and by lawyers that are currently suing the administration for their handling of the Supreme Court decision. But in the meantime, it's creating a lot of uncertainty and misinformation. So I urge
mm.
everyone on here, but especially our immigrant and undocumented families, to go to homeishere.us, which is a part of a coalition that we are a part of, and to get
Mhm.
informed around DACA updates because they're going to be continuous.
Vanessa, personally, what has it been like for you the last 4 years being a DACA recipient?
Yeah, and I think for me, I received the program right out of college. And so I was able to take advantage of the program. Prior to that, I was going to continue supporting my mom as a domestic worker. I'm a proud daughter of domestic workers. And so that was going to be what I was going to do. And I was not necessarily going to use my degree. DACA really paved the way for me to be able to achieve my dream, which was to be a teacher. Still the greatest job
Mm,
I have ever had, and one of the main reasons why I'm still committed to the K 12 system. As I have now transitioned into getting a petition from family because I've been able to at least seek out to adjust my status, I have seen the power of the immigrant community to advocate for themselves, to seek out resources and supports, and truly remembering that we didn't receive DACA out of a presidency, but rather it came from immigrant youth who advocated
mm.
for themselves, for their family, and who are going to continue to do so, regardless of what may come in the fall of this year. So I think
Right.
that's what my experience has been. I've been able to kind of tap into the power of my immigrant story and realize that
Mhm.
my immigration status is just one piece of my larger identity. And now I have the tools to support other people that come after me.
How can people who hear what you're saying and think, I want to get involved, I want to know how to help, I want to be able to keep up with this information, I want to be more informed on this, where should they go? Where should they start?
Yeah, well, I definitely think that, immigration and immigration policy, when you first look at it, it can be really overwhelming. And so I know a little bit about it because of my own lived experience, right? But I am also not an immigration lawyer. And I think there's a
Mhm.
lot of complexities within immigration and immigration policy. But we can go from really small actions to larger ones. We can go for
Mm,
us thinking, have we supported immigrant entrepreneurs? Have we supported organizations that are being led by immigrants that are thinking about and really have been those that have financially supported many undocumented families during this really uncertain and challenging time? We could also think
mhm.
about in our roles, right? In our specific jobs, have you elevated the stories and the impact of those directly impacted? Are they a part of the decision making process in your organization, in your school, in whatever entity you work and are a part of? Are you always thinking about how your actions are going to impact the immigrant and undocumented community who are a part of this country? And then I also think we can think larger. We can think about
Mm,
advocating for whether it's state, local, or even federal support to ensure that our immigrant families are part of any type of stimulus package that is provided in regards to COVID. They have to be a part of it because COVID has shown us how we are all so deeply intersected. And because they are human beings, simple. And then we could even take it higher, right? If you are eligible to vote. And I name that because I've been in the country for 20 years and I'm still not eligible to vote. And so I think there's this idea that everybody can vote. We know that folks that have been formerly incarcerated also cannot vote, right? And so
right.
it is important that we understand that when we say go out and vote, there's complexities within that. And there may be folks who do fit that and who may not. So if you are able to vote, I urge you to do that. I urge you to get as many of your friends as possible to do so, and then to be ready on whoever may win this election coming in November to hold them accountable for the rights and the power of our
Mm,
immigrant students and families in our schools. I think this last piece is important to name, especially with this current context in regard to Black Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter movement. We have to start really, really thinking about how immigrants, especially Black immigrants, are impacted by both the intersection of immigrant justice, and the current, really reckoning of what it means to be a Black immigrant in this country. It is understanding
Mm,
from our end that we know that there are actually about 4 times more likely to be detained and deported. And so, as
wow.
somebody who's a non-Black Latinx woman, I have to be really conscious about how I show up in this space and understand
Mhm.
that I need to uplift that experience and that voice, not only now, but forever.
I have one more question for you. Where are you finding hope right now? It's a high stakes election year, a lot going on. Where are you
Yeah,
finding hope?
there's a lot happening, and honestly, I think our immigrant community gives me a lot of hope. I think that oftentimes when we talk about these issues is very much, bloom and doom, right? But in the
Mhm.
middle of it all, I have families who are texting me on WhatsApp and are finding joy. Or I think about an immigrant mother who right now is she's seeking out business classes so that she could start her own business while supporting her child with remote learning, while trying to
Mhm.
understand everything that's happening. And so that to me brings me a lot of hope. And I think every time I support a parent or anyone at M schools, I think a lot about my family. And I think a lot about what it could have been if I would have received these supports when I was in school, or what the trajectory would have been like for my parents. So I get hope daily from our immigrant community.
Vanessa Luna, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Take care.